Good morning. This is the BLAINESWORLD podcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and you can also get more information about the show as well as past shows at our website, which is kind of behind me. That's www.blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in the lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. Each week, we focus on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce my guest for today's show, and she is Amy Upham. Am I getting it correctly? Yeah. Amy Upham, who's the Executive Director at Blue Ridge Pride. Amy, you can feel free to wave to all your fans and friends who are watching you. Okay, this is
Hello,
Amy Upham.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. Amy Upham spent 20 years in behavioral health before pivoting to leading Blue Ridge Pride, which has a mission near and dear to her heart. We'll talk about that in just a second. She has her master's in public health and I love this, great line, master's in public health and in hard knocks, great line. Throughout her life, leadership has, and this is great, I love it too, has continually found her, and she is now in midlife settled with the role. I love it. It just kind of finds you. You're just there, and so I find Amy up. So the question is, Amy, first of all, first time I meet somebody, you grew up as a child where?
In Pawling, New York, which is a little town about an hour and a half north of New York City in the Hudson Valley.
So when you were growing up as a girl in upstate New York, I guess, did you always know you wanted to be executive director of a nonprofit in Asheville, North Carolina?
No, I thought I was going to be a doctor.
So you went to school, you studied pre-med or all that kind of stuff?
I wanted to study pre-med, but I was terrible in physics. I don't have the best spatial intelligence. I'm very good at biology and all of those sciences, but not so much the spatial. And you have to take that for pre-med. So I switched to my second love, which was writing. And so I got my bachelor's in English, actually, was my bachelor's.
Okay. And then did you go past there for your master's?
Yep. And then actually several years later, 15 years or so later, I started my master in public health, which I finished just a few years ago.
Okay. So what got you then from English? So you got a degree in English. Did you utilize that, or were you writing or teaching? What were you doing with that degree?
Yeah. So, I always like to say that both my studies in English and writing and the work that I did afterwards, which was in behavioral health and disability rights, the thing that ties them together is stories. So I grew up Catholic. I'm no longer Catholic, but I definitely took away from that the idea of helping other people and how important that was. And so I took my love of stories and I took it to folks that I felt like I could help, which at the time in my early 20s was people with disabilities, developmental disabilities. And I just, set about advocating for them. So I did use my English degree in some ways, like in writing newsletters and in policy advocacy, but mostly I kind of pivoted to social services.
And even as you said, use your background, even now, probably every day, you're using your writing background and communication skills. But then fast forward. So when did you come to, excuse me, when did you come to Asheville?
I came to Asheville 10 years ago to get out of the very, very cold of Buffalo, because I ended up after graduating college in Buffalo, New York for about 10 years. I loved it there. It's amazing. Visit in the summer if you can, but not great to live there year round.
And that's like we got to Asheville from North Carolina, sort of the same reason. We didn't love the cold winters and snow. And so when you came to Asheville, what were you doing initially?
So I was working in behavioral health. I was a benefits counselor. The 20 years or so that I spent in behavioral health was all about advocacy, whether it was housing or benefits or people's rights. So that at that point in time, I was actually recruited here as a benefits counselor.
And so what got you to Pride then?
So I did behavioral health work here for about 10 years. And then earlier this year, well, actually late last year, my wife got pregnant with our first kid. And, after COVID, a lot of people in behavioral health and healthcare got burned out, and I was among them. And with a kid on the way, I just said, I need to take a step back from the intensity of a crisis every day, all the time, and do something that's a little bit more joyful. And so I started looking, it took several months to find something that was right for me. And of course, Pride came up, and I was like, well, as a queer woman, this is great. It's important. And a lot of the work is is very uplifting.
And when you were talking about pride, then you were certainly at the right place at the right time,
Yeah.
because when you were looking, explain and how come the opening came with pride.
So Tina White, who's fantastic and built us a great foundation as an organization, she retired, and she is also moving. So that was why they were looking for a new executive director.
So again, being at the right place at the right time,
That's
you
right.
were there. And I guess based on what I'm hearing you say, your background had kind of led you almost into that direction. You know, you had done a lot of things, I guess gave you the background for this kind of work.
Yeah. So the job I had right before this job was another executive director position, but for a substance use agency. So I had the ED experience. I had a lot of grant writing experience, and that's part of using my degree there. Um, and of course, I have experience as a queer person. So
So this kind of was tailored for you. And for the benefit of the folks who don't know what pride is, let's start from the top there. What is pride?
So there are pride centers in most cities, and some towns throughout the United States, and generally they are the LGBTQ plus focus point for people in the community, whether it's events or resources. Some pride centers also run a lot of programming. We do a mix of all of that. So that's generally speaking, that's what pride centers do.
And let me ask you too, something we had talked about just before we got on the air here, but most people are at least familiar now with LGBTQ, but I have to ask you then, now you say LGBTQ plus, is that it? Or I was doing some research before the show and I was reading it's other people add on IA. Explain
Mhm.
what that is, if you would, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So for a long time in all of our literature and mission, we said LGBTQ plus. Plus just means, the folks that we may have left out on the sexuality and gender spectrum. But the IA, that's something that we're actually considering, we'll be considering adding going into our strategic planning next year. I stands for intersex, and then A stands for a few different things. Asexual, aromantic are a couple of them. And there's others there that I'm not naming, but so we're thinking about adding the IA.
But I think what you just said earlier makes sense, though, is that it's plus includes other stuff, because when you started
Yep.
mentioning IA and then said, well, there are four IA things, we could also have an acronym, this long, so
Yep.
I guess it would be confusing to some. So let me ask you this then. So I have the idea of the organization. We'll talk about specifically what you do, but what does an executive director do for the organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think an executive director role is a little bit mysterious if you've never done it. Like what do you do? So I mean, executive directors are responsible for managing HR, even if they're not the HR director. In our organization, we're small enough; we don't have an HR director, so I manage the HR. I manage the events because we're too small to have a marketing,
Right.
director. Um, I manage the budget. The board oversees the fiscal stability, but I bring the ideas for grants and such, and make sure that we can keep payroll going and keep our events going. Um, I do social stuff like this and make sure our image gets out there and that we're sending a positive message. That can include policy advocacy. So we do some of that. We've worked with city council in the past and campaign for Southern equality to push policy that is positive. I mean, it's just sort of a different thing every day. That's why I love it. You do something different almost every day.
Well, also in your spare time, you do some fundraising as well. Is that
Well,
correct?
there's that, right?
In your spare time, but talk about it, because a lot of people don't realize the significance and how big you are and what you folks do. But just even the staff, you have how many other folks working with there aside from you?
Yeah, so we have one other full-time and one paid part-time staff. And then we have a contractor who works with us on the oral history project, Amanda Ray, who's amazing and keeps our oral history up for the whole region. And she is paid quarterly. And then we have a lot of contractors, I would say at least 20 that work with us for the festival. We have over 100 volunteers. Um, and yeah, sometimes we'll bring in like a graphic design, contractor and that kind of thing. So it's managing a lot of moving parts.
And talk about, you mentioned an oral history. What's
Yeah.
that all about?
So we have one of the largest oral history collections of the LGBTQIA plus population in the Southeast. I think the only one that beats us out is Miami. We have 107 interviews, similar to this, with lesbian, gay, and queer people across the Western North Carolina, asking about what life was like for them in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and some interviews are from um, more recent times, and it's a way to keep that vibrancy and history alive.
Now, are those interviews videotaped or are they audio?
They're
Or
audio taped. I think some may be videotaped, but the majority are audio taped.
okay, very cool. So if people want to then listen to the history, say
Mhm.
for the Asheville area, what do they do or how do they find it?
Yes, they can go to our website and under programs, they can click on Oral History Project, and that will take them to a bunch of some featured stories and then also links to the repository. The repository is actually situated with UNCA. They've been a great partner of ours. And so they actually hold the database because we don't have really the capacity to hold that kind of large of a database at this point. So UNCA is kind of our library.
And very exciting. There's something I hadn't known about. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
If folks want to get into that or find it, best bet is to go to your website initially.
Yep. The
And
website under programs.
what's that website, if you would, please?
Yeah, sure. It's www.blueridgepride.org.
Okay, so we'll talk about some of the other stuff at that website, but they can go to the website again. Once again, the website was what? www.
.blueridgepride.org.
It's really cool. So if they go there, they can find information about all these 107 interviews that have been done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so what do? You add to it each year or whenever you get in the mood to add to it?
Yeah, so Amanda trains the interviewers on sort of how to do, and volunteers can be interviewers, and they can also tell their story. So it's kind of cool. They can do both if they want to, or they can just interview. We pay the interviewers a small stipend for doing that, and then we try to recruit storytellers. A diverse set of storytellers from all ages, races, backgrounds, rural, urban. From across Western North Carolina.
Cool stuff. So talk about that as well, that if somebody wants to get involved in this part of the work you do, they find information on the website.
Yeah, they could fill out a volunteer application on the website.
So, and then they get right into it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Talk about also, aside from volunteering in that capacity, you mentioned you can use other volunteers. What else do you use volunteers for?
It's a great question. So the biggest is the festival. That's where we have over 100 day of. On September 30th, we had over 100 people. But we also use volunteers for other events where we have to table because we're such a small staff. It's great to bring on
Right.
one or two people. And we have a couple of other larger events where we need some volunteers as well. So we use them throughout the year. And sometimes somebody will raise their hand and be like, I want to do graphic design for you for free. And we're like, awesome. Yes, you can do that.
We love that word. Free is the approved term. Everybody wants to do work for free. But one of the things that people should pick up if they're listening to this, and I'll have to ask you to remind me about it as well. We missed the festival, and I'll have you talk about it in a second this year. But do me a favor, put it on your calendar if you would, a month before the festival next year. Let's do a podcast talking about it, upcoming.
Perfect.
But since you mentioned it, I saw it, got a lot of press on it, did a great job on getting the word out. What was the festival all about? And we missed it. It was what, last month?
September 30th. Yep.
September 30th. What was that all about?
Yeah. So each year, it's our annual Pride Festival. Generally, it's all about celebrating who we are, being able to be who we are. We, of course, invite allies in to celebrate with us and to support us. But this year, we have a different theme each year. And this year, the theme was advocate. So, there's a lot of anti-trans laws that have been passed across the country. And specifically here in North Carolina, there's at least 3 that were passed, basically barring trans youth from healthcare, from sports. So it's really scary stuff. And so we had a couple of politicians speak. We had voter registration drive. We featured the social justice nonprofits by putting them in the middle of the festival so that they were the easiest to access. And we also had elected officials leading the we don't call it a parade. We call it the Welcoming Western North Carolina Procession. So we had, Jasmine Beach Ferrara and Mayor Esther Manheimer, and several different commissioners and city council folks, kind of just, being there and saying this, we support Pride, which is really important, that visibility for us.
Where was the festival held?
In Pack Square Park. That's where it's every year usually.
Okay. And so this is open to the public, and it's typically the end of September?
Yeah, it's usually the last Saturday of September.
Okay, so yeah, definitely gotta let me know in advance, and I'll be there next year. Just I saw some of the press on it. I think you did a great job getting word out. But
Thanks.
the nice thing about it, it's open to the whole Asheville community. You try and get everybody there, not just
Everybody.
LGBTQ folks.
We had the rumors are so we had 17,000 people last year, and everybody I've talked to, from vendors to volunteers to people who were running festivals, they say we probably had at least 20,000.
Wow.
So it's a huge festival. Yep.
And so when people came to the festival, you mentioned like we call it, didn't call it a parade, you did the opening ceremony. There's some workshops. What else happened? What else took place at the festival?
Yeah, so there were 8 performances on the main stage, from drumming to the gay men's choir to some rock and roll musicians and hip hop. And then there was another stage. We have another stage in the upper park that has 4 acts. So that's more the smaller acts, or the like folk music that's a little bit lighter. And then we had a youth zone for youth, with everything from a craft table to headphones if they were overstimulated. We had a mental health zone with a calming tent for folks who couldn't, maybe deal with all the noise or just wanted resources. And then we had sort of a health fair section where we had vaccines, COVID vaccines, as well as HIV testing. So we really tried to make it for everybody and bring in every element that we possibly could. And every single vendor, but I would say 95% of the vendors were local.
And what we'll do next year, you see in the back, we'll bring in Blaine's World because I want to get
Yes.
involved in as well. But that was
Yeah.
something. So I can't believe it. You had just started not too long before, and this is the very first thing. You must have been there just a couple months, and then you told
Uh-huh.
you're in charge of this event.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
That was
Uh-huh.
some way to welcome you. So that's the big event. Talk about also something, Amy, you told me about off the air, which I'm very excited about. I'll give a shout out to the folks working with you on it. But they're
Yeah.
coming, I guess, for the first time you're doing a film festival.
Yeah, it's a film series. We're hoping to build it up to a festival eventually, but for right now, over the next year, we'll do one film a quarter on a Monday night at the Grail. And so the first one's December 4th. Each one is going to benefit a different LGBTQIA nonprofit, or the people that serve them. So WinCap is the first one on December
Okay.
4th with Paris is Burning. It starts at 7 p.m. And each one is going to have a different element. So with Paris is Burning on the 4th, Ganymede, who's a local drag icon, will be starting the show. And then we'll roll right into the movie. So we're excited. I think we really want to highlight LGBTQ artists. I don't think that's, been done enough in this area.
I just love the idea. And yeah, WinCap, I've done a show on WinCap years ago when I was on the radio, good group. But
Yeah.
so what's exciting about this? So WinCap is the first time, and then the second, a quarter later, will be what group?
So we haven't designated, we know the nonprofits. It's going to be Youth Outright, Transmission, and Blue Ridge Pride. What we haven't done yet is designate exactly which month for who, but that will be coming soon. But those are the 4 nonprofits that will be, sort of featured. But WinCap and Blue Ridge Pride are sponsoring all of them. So we are helping to put all of them on.
And for the benefit of folks who don't know the movie, and I'm not sure I do, it would say, is Paris Burning? Is the first
Paris is
one?
Burning.
What's that about? Have you seen it?
Um, So yeah, it's about, from what I understand, and I haven't seen the movie yet, so I'm going to get to
Okay,
see it for the first time December 4th. But it's about drag culture, house culture, the ballroom scene. So a lot of people in the LGBTQ community have been threatened over the past couple of years, and drag is one of the
sure.
unfortunate foci of that for people. So we really wanted to highlight um, drag performance.
Now, if folks want to get information about the film festival, again, go to the website
It's actually not on the website yet, but it should be this week.
in your
It's
spare
yeah,
time, right?
yeah. It's but actually we have the marketing is going to be rolled out this week, both on our website and on social media. So
Okay.
actually, I would say join our Facebook and Instagram would be the best way to keep up to
I
date
was
with
just going to
everything.
ask you that. So if they
Yeah.
join Facebook, it dates me in terms of age. I'm not really yet an Instagram guy, but if Facebook and Instagram, you're located, it's under just the name of the organization.
Yep, just at Blue Ridge Pride.
Okay, and that's the best way for people to get involved. Talk about
Yeah.
other people getting involved. So we talked already a little bit about you're seeking volunteers and you're always looking for people to help. Um, if people just want to keep abreast of what's happening, do you have a newsletter? Do you have other
Yeah.
information they can find out more?
Yeah, we've got a newsletter that goes out to about 2,500 people. We would love to add people, of course, to that. On our website, at the bottom of each page, there's a thing that says subscribe. So they can click to subscribe to that newsletter and we'll add them in the next month.
Okay, the newsletter comes out how often?
Every month,
Okay,
about mid-month.
okay, so that's the best way if they want to find out about Pride. That's the best way to do that.
Yeah, I would say, and if they want even more frequent, would be to go on our Instagram. We post something on Instagram or Facebook almost every day, but the newsletter comes out monthly.
Okay, so they want to keep informed and they still find out about the activities and other stuff you guys are doing.
Yep.
Okay, talk about. So we mentioned the festival. We talked about the film project. I'm very excited. I didn't know that the oral history project as well. What else are you folks doing?
Yeah, so push, we've got a few other programs. We've got Generation
Seems.
Plus,
What's
which
that?
serves folks in our community that are 55 or over. That's funding through Buncombe County government and through the aging services. So that focuses on trying to reduce social isolation for lesbian and gay people over the age of 55. We do that through social events, through educational events. Um, we had, for example, in August, we had somebody from Pisca Legal come and talk about, um, you know, end of life kind of paperwork. But we also want people to have fun. So we take them to the movies, we take them hiking, and it's a really great program. We're also adding to that. We're not only going to be doing those things, but also our Generation Plus manager, Chrissy Stewart, who is lovely, she really wants to start providing social services to these people. We're getting requests on our website like, hey, my mom's sick and needs someone to visit her. And I'm in, Arizona. Can you all help? So we're going to start with our volunteer base and put a call out and see if there's volunteers that want to take somebody to the hospital or a doctor's appointment or visit them because they live alone or they live in long-term care facility. So that's another one of our programs.
So it seems to me, I'm looking. I don't see in the background, but I'm missing the balls to juggle all this stuff. You have like, but it seems you have. Well, I see one big ball in the back where you're sitting on,
I actually
perhaps.
can juggle. That's
Can
kind of
you
funny.
really?
I
Well,
can. Mhm.
but by the way, that'd be a great. You do a presentation, or next time we have you on the podcast, I'll have you do it, and just talk about each one. This one too. That's really funny. But boy, that certainly keeps you busy doing different kinds of things.
Yeah.
What do you see yourself? You've been in the position now all of X number of months. What do you see for the future? What's happening? Where do you want
I
to
think for
go?
I think for the future, what I just talked about with helping senior citizens that are LGBTQ, I think we're going to get there for other folks too, whether it's students. So we just secured office space near UNCA with actually their LGBTQ and BIPOC, meaning Black, Indigenous, people of color student house. So we have presence there 3 or 4 days a week, so we can work with the students. I see us providing support groups for mental health. I see us providing opportunities for businesses to network. So we also have a business alliance that's sort of in its infancy stage, but that we're working to link LGBTQ owned and allied businesses to give them some support. There's a lot that we can do, honestly. And actually, the way that we're going to try to focus our work going forward, because I have too many ideas, is at the early next year, we're going to roll out a survey, a health survey, and see what services people are missing that we could help plug in and provide.
And talk about also something we were mentioning off the air, but talk about it now, the role of your board and what the board does in the organization.
Yeah, so our board right now is 5 people, amazing, dedicated humans. It is going to very soon increase. We're having elections tomorrow, and we have 9 or 10 people to present. So it'll triple in size probably by next year. Boards of an organization, they really, while the executive director helps steer the ship wouldn't be there without the board of directors. And so the board helps with fundraising. They help make sure that there's, a fiscally stable plan. They're going to help with strategic planning. And we're going to do that early next year or maybe mid next year. And then some board members have very specific roles, like our oral history project director is on our board. And so that's her role, is to really run that program. It's a little unique. Our board president, David Perry, he's juggling a lot of balls too. He's our development director. So he's the one who conduits with our sponsors, who we've just been able to grow that sponsorship over the years to a level that's been really helpful for us. Yeah, so each board member does different things. They might be on committees. KP Whaley, who's the director at 103.3 FM, he's on our board, and he was also on our festival committee. So he helped with the planning of the festival. They're very invested.
So the point is, if somebody's interested in getting involved, you'll put them to work, but you don't want people just to put their name down. You're going to put them to work.
Yes, so we need them. Yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
Because you raise a good point. The problem with being on a board is that if they don't do anything, it's almost a waste. It's a waste of their time and of course your time. So I'm really impressed that if you want to get involved with Pride, you're going to be doing something.
Yes,
which is really cool. Let me ask you maybe a couple of final questions here. One having to do with being a member of the LGBTQ plus community in the Asheville area. Gotten better, worse, stayed the same? How is it for the members of the community?
I think we like to think that we're sort of a bubble in Asheville, but we're very small. You just go 5 miles outside, and it's a different world. So I don't really think it's a bubble, because I think that's too close for comfort. I would say things haven't changed locally too much, but of course on the state level they have. So for example, healthcare has changed. School has changed. The Asheville school system and the Buncombe County school system are debating whether or not to enforce some of these laws that have been passed that say, basically, don't say gay bill.
Right.
And are they going to do that with their students? And that they're even debating that is troublesome to me. So I think things, and of course I'm from New York. So, I come from a place that's a little bit more progressive. And so anything to me here seems a little less so, but I do think that we're in a particularly vulnerable time because of the state laws.
And it seems, unfortunately, as you're saying, the vulnerable time, it doesn't necessarily seem like it's getting better. It's, like, I'd love to have you on a show and you tell me just about all the great stuff for the LGBTQ community, but it seems, unfortunately, you're having to fight for everything you get, or getting the word out. And so right. I guess the key then becomes, if people want to support the movement, and again, we should also mention the fact too, I assume you're looking for support from people. You don't have to be an LGBTQ plus member to support the organization. Is that correct?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So you want to get people, and you're really opening my eyes on this show. So I really appreciate this. Sure. Back to Pride then, to conclude, we said the best way to get involved is to go to the website, I guess, and get on the newsletter first, and then
get on the newsletter. And then if they want to volunteer, that's under the I forget what it's called, but the support tab, where they can either donate also. I would say strongly encourage that, not because I'm a nonprofit director and I need to say that, but also because Pride centers are not well funded by government entities or by grants. We're mostly reliant on sponsors and donors. So I would say if you're going to give somewhere at the end of this year, especially after everything that's happened at the state legislature, Pride is a really good bet. As well as all of the other LGBTQ organizations, they all need our support right now.
And again, at the website, they'll mention an opportunity if they want to donate or get involved. There's certainly a way to do that via the website.
Yep.
Okay. Well, anyway, Amy, I'd like to thank you for being my guest on this edition of Blaine's World podcast. Also, congratulations that you mentioned to me before the show. It's the first time you've ever been on a podcast. So you did great. We got through the process. And I look forward to meeting you or getting together with you sometime in the future. And so thank you. And also I thank my producer, Cappy Tassetti, for putting together the show. And we'll see you next time around.
Okay, Amy, thank you. This is great. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks for being my guest.